Rodney, why did we write this book?
I don't know.
Wrong guy to ask.
Like a good idea.
It was a good idea at the time.
It really started with Rodney.
Yeah, he's the one to blame. If you don't like the book, he's the one to blame.
And the energy, I think, behind it and all that sort of stuff. The problem is when you first asked me, hey, let's do a book on Jesus, my comment was, there are a few really great textbooks out there.
And those textbooks try to answer the questions, about the Gospels and the significance of Jesus, really informed by scholarly questions, right?
Right, and I think the questions that they ought to answer.
Right.
As
Exactly.
scholars, but there are student questions that a lot of times scholars don't care about or they never get around to.
Exactly. Because I get questions like, well, what about the Mormon Jesus? And I would think, well, we don't have time for that.
Right.
And that's what they really were interested in. Is the Mormon Jesus the same as our Jesus?
And as Islam ascends in everybody's sort of thoughts, people wonder. They know about Jesus too. They believe about Jesus. They believe in Jesus too. So,
and of course, also the Gnostic Jesus. A lot of press in America about the Gnostic Jesus, and he's one that's hard to pin down. I mean, he's all over the map, isn't he? As far as which Gnostic Jesus are we talking about?
Right.
And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if we got our heads together and said, let's do a book that privileges the canon, the New Testament, and yet also appreciate how varied the picture of Jesus is in every book of the New Testament, and then have that before the reader, making them think through, oh my goodness, that's a Jesus I really don't know much about.
And I think what we did that was fun was we used the question of that Jesus asks his disciples at Caesarea Philippi.
who do you say that I am?
Who do you say that I am?
Right.
And I think we did a little fun with that, and so we would start by saying, who, like he's asking Mark.
Right.
Mark, who do you say that I am? And so we'd say, who does Mark say that Jesus is in the first part of the chapter? And then the second part would be, how is Mark's Jesus different? Which was fun.
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
fun. And then the last part, which was sometimes
That was
the most fun of all.
that's where we had the most fun. It was a thought experiment.
It really was. I mean, because at one time, going back to Mark, there was a church that only had one gospel. They didn't have letters. They didn't have John. They only had Mark's gospel. So what would they take away, and what would they think about Jesus if all they had was Mark's gospel?
Right. So the last section is, what if this were our only Jesus?
Right.
So that was really fun. So we go through not just the four Gospels, which is what you would expect.
Yes.
But then we would say, well, what about Paul's Jesus?
Right.
What about the Jesus of Hebrews?
Right.
What about the journal epistles? What about the Apocalypse?
Right.
Right.
The
So we
scary
look at all of those. Exactly. And then we go, and that would have been a fun book, but then we go a little further and say, what about the Gnostic Jesus? What about the Muslim Jesus? What about the Mormon Jesus?
Right.
So, and all of that, and we don't take those to be the same. Like you said, we privilege the gospel ones. But today, when I think about Jesus, I like to pretend that I just went straight from Mark, but I didn't. I'm a product of.
And that's the presumption we're challenging, because we all have a Jesus in our head that really is a composite, right? He's a mosaic of parts of the Gospels, little Paul, maybe a lot of Paul, right?
Movies that we've seen.
The cinematic Jesus.
One of the most fun parts of this project has been thinking about all the movies, the Jesus movies, that are out there, and how they reflect culture, but also how they
It's a
impact our
smorgasbord Jesus, and the way it shows up is, we talk all the time about the rich young ruler, but you have a young ruler
in one gospel,
and you have a rich ruler
right,
in a couple others. So you can only have a rich young ruler if you put all the stories together.
And what concerns us, of course, is that when you start trying to make an homogenized Jesus, informed by what we see in film, right? Informed by our culture, our favorite praise songs, whatever Jesus we have in our head, we tend to believe that composite constructed Jesus is the real one.
Right.
So when we find the Jesus that doesn't fit that, either in the Bible or even outside the Bible, we immediately dismiss it. And so this was really an exercise of helping us rediscover the parts of Jesus we've ignored in the Bible, and then seeing how the Jesus that exists outside the Bible has informed our mental image of him, our view of him, either good or not so good.
right.
So, and it's kind of a surprise, like, I had no idea the Mormons believed certain things about him, and when I realized, like, oh my goodness, that Mormon Jesus sounds a lot like some of the Jesuses I've met in evangelical churches. So it's been a really healthy exercise to get us to recognize that none of us are privileged in our view of Jesus, right? We all have an informed one, and that's so the way we wrote the book. Randy was, started us with my Jesus, and he ended us with our Jesus. And the point is, none of us can claim him as their own. He doesn't belong to me or you, right? He belongs to all of us.
The church through the ages, really.
Exactly.
And we are standing
global, worldwide, down through the ages.
And we're standing on the shoulders of all those people who have brought him to us through text and through imagination and through
so
books.
rather than go through like a smorgasbord and just pick the parts of Jesus that
we
I
like.
Instead, let's look at the whole thing, and it was our exercise to rediscover Jesus. And in the end, we invite our readers to join us as we try to rediscover Jesus.
That's a good way to say it.
It'd be fun.